So ahead of the Gratiaen shortlist / Gratiaen Prize 2019, myself and a few of my friends thought of putting together a clip to represent some of the poetry in the manuscript that I have submitted and which is now among the final 4. So this is largely for the benefit of people who have been making inquiries, who have been talking to me about this. And since my collection is still not available in print. So my collection has 3 sections, each section having a separate title. The first section is called Sentimental Pieces. It has about 40 poems along personal themes, lyrical, introspective, and pretty much on the private domain of things. Then there are 2 narrative driven sections, slightly longer. One is called The Private Funeral, which is set around the funeral of a woman who is being mourned by her partner, who is trying to carry out the final rites and rituals according to the woman's desires. And the third section is called Classical War Poems. It's a section in about 7 separate movements, which dramatizes, or at least on the surface it looks like it dramatizes, fairly well-known war and conflict scenarios from classical antiquity. So in our clip today, we will be presenting excerpts from the first 2 sections of the book, that is Sentimental Pieces and The Private Funeral. The classical war poems I will shelf it for now, because I have a feeling prior to a definite final publication, I would like to edit that section a little bit more.
On Sunday morning she died, when the hearse that shone in the falling evening light came up the winding road towards home. On the balcony I was standing, alone, with my hands on the railing, my heart numb and heavy, overlooking the driveway. It was as if my heart too was dead, I later recalled, and was hanging out of habit to the tubes that were connected to it. The tea-coloured, polished coffin they bore, I directed them to place it in the left corner of the open space facing the east. Tomorrow, when the dawn breaks, the first light of the day will come through the window and greet the dead casket bearing her remains. If that doesn't bring her to life, then it can safely be said that nothing more will. Then they left, indifferently. They saw their way out, leaving me back there by you. I stood for a moment by the locked, sad box. I touched the top of the fastened lid with the flat of my palm. I traced the smooth surface vacantly, without thought. Who will come for this funeral? Whom should I ask to come? I am choked with the impulse to unfasten the top and at you to take a look, to fasten it and to have it open onto a side, to watch your lifeless face in the last trickles of the day's lingering light. I think I can feel the rush in me gather pace. I think this denial of grief cannot hold much long. I am weak and I'm shaken, and I know it is the shock that keeps me from breaking down. The paperman rings the bell when the shaking of the gate wouldn't work. By now, there are 3 of us in the house, 2 friends and I. After a night of grieving, I was there standing by, watching as I anticipated the falling softness of the earliest light touch the side of the coffin. The paperman's ringing cracks my meditation and it dies. From where I stand, I see the front door, and through it, far away, I see the intruder's form. Yesterday night, when others had retired for the night, I sat there by you in the glow of the pale blue light. I stood up, and I walked closer to the coffin, and I took off the picture. Its glass with my forefinger I brushed. I laid the portrait aside on the cupboard. I had decided to open the casket lid. I kissed your forehead and I stroked your hair, for the hair alone remained real from yesterday. I replaced the portrait on its rightful position. I tried to recollect when it was that we last kissed, as we last made love in its last dying moments.
Aware of the door's creak, the clang of the replacing latch, from shadow to shadow, in silence I sneaked. Trees among dark foliage shakes in the damp half-light. I had decided that this had to be that night. For days, untouched, from the vantage of my lookout, I had in patience watched your letterbox. Dim lights, drawn curtains across French glass. Whoever kept house was tucked away inside, leaving a streaming lamp over the terrace to burn. I had made my bones young, but no matter of the time, courage, and the qualification, your heart beat that fast every single night. With a lift of the metal that made the flap, and even before the dog to stir an ear could, I had taken it and retreated, a shadow among the trees for good. Of the romance and the mystic power over the world you held, the bank statement and the note on letterhead gave no indication. Then there was a card, in a cursive hand, steady and at ease, addressed to you, that figure skated from line to line without a crease. Most likely, what was hidden in that neat finish in itself was the effort of getting that wording to come right. Perhaps the shreds and pieces of where he had erred were a hushed secret between him and his recycling pile. I try to visualize him as he seemed to you from a mile. Decades later, when what had stayed back as memory was only the lurking from tree to tree under the blanket of night, it didn't matter whether what made one follow that card was love, yearning, or heady mirth of the will to kiss, or at least troubled nights fearing that she would be his. For she has long since moved to a country where it snows whenever here it burnt scorched sun. For her seed has nourished life, which through park benches among acres of manicured grass tumbled to run. For perhaps I always had it known. For her, he wasn't the destined one.
There is a thin, unobtrusive drizzle as your coffin is lowered into the grave. It is almost a rhythmic and ritualistic motion as the belt carries the sealed casket down the distance. I watch from where I am as the distance grows. That resignation and that ever-growing distance comes faster than the mind can view. There has been time for me to visual these last moments of what I would have left in the end with you, but I am frozen for action. I am expected to throw in a handful of fresh earth. I shovel with my hands from the new dug deposited mound and gently let it fall there into the hole. I see the earth scatter and hit the top of the casket, more to one end. I am equally conscious of a dull humming sound that keens my skull from end to end. The kind of sound you hear when the radio was over, but less shrill. I see people moving about, but I have a problem in really focusing on one thing. I walk down the road, winding down from the burial area. I am conscious of stepping aside from awkward ends, jutting out of marble sites of those buried long ago. The curvaceous road spins downwards from where you were laid to rest. I know that as I will take the bend near the flamboyant tree, I will be losing sight of the area on the hill where you now lie. I stop and I take a deliberated, prolonged look back uphill. There are still some of them hanging about your pit, while workers from the cemetery are busy refilling the shrine which has accepted what of you now remains. Where shall I begin? That she was the single most beautiful woman that I ever beheld? That she gave life to me when life was all too routine and mundane for it to be something else? That she stimulated me with her vigor and made me want to make meaning out of life, which up to then had just been a drag? Whatever she may have been, with time she quite easily and without effort became the means and the ends to my days and nights, to the breaths that I took, to the anticipations I had. She made me take a step back from the path on which I was on, and made me realize that I had been walking without movement. The last time we made love, it was on this very bed. I remember it was the Tuesday a fortnight ago. The day before, for some work, she went to Negumbo. It was the day the red and white striped bedsheets had been spread. Along with the pillowcases with the check design, I complained of her being vacant and brooding, as if her soul had transcended the body, and the body alone was in intercourse with me. I remember how this thought, even as it occurred, reminded me of that scene from Annie Hall. When I told her what I felt, she said that the problem was with me. This didn't make much sense, but I let it pass. I'm still arresting my thoughts. I am not letting myself think. I hold back my vision from how it may have happened. I blot out the memory of how you have transformed. Involuntary pictures force their way into that canvas. I blot them out and I delete the entry. I try to think about what I eat and the coffee out of the coffee machine. The first time we ever kissed, I remember that afternoon, there was perfect stillness around us, that I could hear the soft whimper when, after a moment's anticipation, the outermost points of our tentative lips met. That whimper and the subsequent giving in, they have long remained in my mind, as fresh as the air was after an evening's drizzle. I loved you so much. It is a pity you didn't know for sure. You had fingers that with finality bound me to you like a fond extension.
Your memory is most alive to me. in the way I remember you on Primrose Hill. On a walk I wished would linger, not end, touching flowers without picking, gazing at other hills as we stopped and stood at the fall on a bend. The evening light on a calm primrose eve, and a few days from then you were all ready to leave. So, this was it, then. Upon parting we would never come together again, in spite of to the contrary you'd believe. To leave you required much stamina and strength. I remember the last moments being made less awkward by a yelping dog, on that evening, almost late, as it ran up and down behind you, when you watched me leave from behind the gate. You fought, me refusing the cab I wanted you to take, but then gave in to my insistence, for some reason letting me, against your nature, dictate. And then you were gone, perhaps forever. All I can do is remember and wait.
There was a deep sense of foreboding, which was ridiculous in a sense, as there was no way that you would fall sick and die. But I remember tremor moved me that evening as I warmly embraced you, a reluctant goodbye. I knew you would return from where you went, that you would be safe and possibly even happy to be gone. But later, you remembered how I turned at the door to stroke you, almost unexpected, which you had in silence borne. A week later, you had come back, returned with fever and a weak body that needed a lover's close, concentrated care. You took 4 days to recover, to fight out what ailed you, and though I fretted at heart, I couldn't be there.
We take our tea, dissolve them the flimsy moments of time, search each other's soul, bait each other's smile, avoiding as much as we can the other's eye. In moments of silence, which follows my happy response to an anecdote you had shared, I ascertain myself that there is much love in this, that underneath the neat magical filament of awe, there is a magnetic force that to you myself draw. I will not admit this to myself. I will not admit this to you. But perhaps someday, when it is by then too late, when it is by then too over, I may let you know that it was love and that I knew it. In that unrecorded moment one night, as you unknowingly brushed my hand while reaching out for something of which, at that very moment, I lost sight.